Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I wanted to let you know I have been marked safe from Dan O'Dowd's self-driving car apocalypse. This is the guy who has been attacking Elon Musk and Tesla's self-driving cars for a while now. He's gone on this new campaign attacking Tesla FSD. This is Dan O'Dowd sitting on, I don't know, your grandfather's easy chair, apparently an expert on self-driving cars and how to make the world safe. Are you ready for Dan's apocalyptic vision? Let's go.
Down of society. Electric cars. If you have a self-driving car and you hook it on the internet, well, because of automatic updates, all the self-driving cars from one manufacturer will run the identical code. If you find a way to hack one of them, you can hack all of them. They're all in the internet. You send out your malware to infect all that company's cars for, say, some model year, and then you send it a directive. Okay, get out of wherever you are. If you're in a garage, get out of the, open the garage door. If you're in a parking lot, get out of the parking lot. Find the nearest reasonably large street and accelerate to 100 miles an hour. Driving the wrong way. If 10 million cars did that in 5 minutes, millions of people would be dead.
If that doesn't persuade you that Dano is a little off kilter, I don't know what's going to persuade you. Dan is unbalanced. Dan has this paranoid fantasy that Elon Musk is going to create 10 million cars and they're going to get all self-driving, apparently 10 million cars that are all running the exact same software at the exact same time. And they're all going to be hacked at the exact same time, and they're going to drive down the road 100 miles an hour, killing innocent people the wrong way. That is the nightmare scenario that Dano wants you to believe. That this is the nightmare that he's protecting the world from Elon's fleet of self-driving, terrifying robots. I'm not making it up. You heard it from Dan right here. That's the nightmare scenario he's protecting us all from, and we are so lucky to have Dano protecting us from this nightmare. Now let's hear about Dan's early experience with FSD.
We've tested this car, and about every 8 minutes, it has a safety defect. It exhibits a safety defect. It does something that if you did it in a driver's test, the instructor would flunk you. Just do it once, you're flunked. Turn left out of a right turn lane. I mean, something really dumb. It does that all the time. We discovered about every 36 minutes, it would crash into something if the driver didn't grab the wheel.
I find Dan somewhat less than credible. I've been driving Tesla FSD, one form or another, FSD Beta for 20,000 miles, regular FSD, whatever you're calling it, advanced autopilot, auto steer, whatever, for 14,000 miles now. I've got a lot of experience driving Tesla cars with FSD. I don't always drive them in self-driving mode, but I've got tens of thousands of miles of experience with FSD Beta and regular FSD, not counting times I've ridden with other people driving FSD Beta. Does it make mistakes? Sure. Every 8 minutes? I'm not so sure about that. Every 8 minutes that would fail a road test? I don't think so. So, I can't, the problem is he talks out his ass. This is a guy who claims he's doing sophisticated testing and all this stuff. Why don't you have cameras covering every single moment and release all the video? What he does is he does his own stories. He releases 15 seconds of a video or 5 seconds of a video, and it's blurry and it's, not the full, he doesn't show every camera angle. He doesn't make all the video available. He talks out his ass, says this is his experience. I have different experience. Omar has a different experience. Lisa has a different experience. Chuck Cook has a different experience. We all agree that Tesla FSD is not perfect. It's in beta. Does it make left turns from the right lane all the time? No, I don't. I'm trying to remember if I've ever seen it do that. I find that Tesla FSD Beta most of the time makes the correct turns from the correct lanes. There are certain errors that it has made in the past. Most of the time over the course of my driving FSD Beta in particular for about 8 months, it got better at just about everything, and it didn't really get worse at anything. Different people have different experiences, and the individual experience isn't really the best way of describing it. But he just pulls this out his ass. And he says, oh, every 8 minutes this, blah, 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 blah. He hasn't, and one of the things you'll see over the course of this video is he'll refer to Waymo and Cruise and Argo AI or whatever, these other self-driving car companies as leaders in self-driving cars. But he hasn't taken them out for drives, right? He hasn't bought a Cruise or a Waymo or an Argo AI vehicle and put them through the same experience that he's put the Tesla FSD Beta through, right? He's comparing apples to oranges or apples to a fruit basket or apples to a bag of rocks. I don't know what he's comparing it to. They're not the same thing. You can't drive Tesla FSD in a wide variety of circumstances and then say, well, I heard that Cruise and Waymo do better in a limited set of circumstances. If you're going to compare them apples to apples, go get a Waymo, go get a Cruise, put it through the exact same testing that the Tesla's doing. And the reason you can't do it is because they won't drive at all. You put them in the same environments the Teslas will drive, they won't even operate. They're limited. They're not really generalized solutions to the self-driving problem, and Dan doesn't even understand what that means. Now you get Dano obsessed with a beach ball.
I bought a Tesla and hired some guys to do it, and we ran the test to see what would it run over and what wouldn't it. And it would run over little children. A little push stroller, just an ordinary sort of low-end stroller, it would take that out every time. We put a beach ball in front of it. It would hit a beach ball. It hits all sorts of things.
So this is the thing. It didn't really run over children. It ran over something that he simulated as children, right? Teslas have driven something like, Tesla FSD Beta has driven something like 35 million miles. There's 100,000 people driving it and it hasn't run over any pedestrians yet. No children, no pedestrians, no humans have been hit by a Tesla running FSD Beta. Dano creates these fabricated tests, these bizarre scenarios where you're running down a lane of cones and somebody left a toddler mannequin in the middle of the road. Now, we don't know. Would the Tesla have stopped if it was a real child as opposed to Dano's fake child? We don't know. The Tesla's trained in the real world. It's not trained in Dan's fantasy world. This is one of the underlying problems here is there's two fundamental mistakes. Dan thinks the way you solve real world self-driving is you create a whole bunch of very limited scenarios and you get self-driving car companies to say, my car can handle that. And somehow that qualifies you to handle the real world. That's one problem. The reality is the real world is complicated. The way you test driving these cars in the real world is drive them in the real world, and they encounter an infinite variety of scenarios that you can't possibly replicate with a limited number of tests. So that's problem number one. He thinks the solution is create a limited number of scenarios. You're going to see this again later in the video. Prove you can meet these tests, and then you can go drive in the real world. This is bass-ackwards. The other problem is he continually refers to Tesla as Tesla can't do this, Tesla can't do that. He doesn't subject the other companies to the same requirement. He will later say, yeah, the other companies should do that. But when he compares them, he says Waymo, Cruise, Argo AI, whoever are ahead of Tesla. He's not comparing them in the same context. He's saying, I drove a Tesla in this circumstance and it was bad. And I read about Waymo, Cruise, and Argo AI, which I've never even ridden in. I've never seen them operate. They're doing better according to something I read somewhere. That's not an objective comparison, a fair comparison. I drove one, I read about another. Go get an Argo AI, go get a Cruise, go get a Waymo, put them through the same tests that you put Tesla through, and let's see what happens. Dan won't do that. Dan can't do that. It's silly. And just to be clear, I agree that FSD Beta is not perfect in a particular way, that it's not great at avoiding road debris. In my neighborhood, there are palm trees that drop palm fronds in the road, and FSD Beta does not avoid the palm fronds. It does not avoid potholes. There are certain types of road debris that the car will hit. And you, as a person supervising the car, you have to decide, do I want to hit that or not? The answer is usually no, and you have to steer away and keep it from hitting that thing. And we all know that as FSD Beta testers, and that's why there hasn't been one pedestrian hit by an FSD Beta car. That's why the FSD Beta test so far is a roaring success. Remarkably safe, safer than human drivers overall. FSD Beta, supervised by a human, is safer than humans driving cars alone. That's the safety record. And Dan ignores the actual safety record of actual FSD Beta cars on the road, how they're doing. He completely ignores that. Just before I go forward, I want to be clear that I invited Dan to come on my YouTube channel to have a conversation. I know Omar has also offered to have a conversation with him. Let's have a discussion, what you're doing. Let's have a debate. And Dan has so far ignored us or refused or whatever. Dan is not willing to engage in a conversation with somebody who might have a different opinion. He went on this guy's channel who has basically the same opinion. but he's not willing to engage in a conversation and answer tough questions because he probably knows he wouldn't possibly hold up if he had to face tough questions.
If you're designing a self-driving car, I mean, it's called full self-driving and autopilot. You should not, you should have to prove your self-driving car doesn't run over children in a crosswalk before you're allowed to put it on the road.
This is a problem. So first of all, human drivers hit children in crosswalks every once in a while. Human drivers make mistakes. This one of the fundamental things that Dan gets wrong. I guess the third thing he fundamentally gets wrong is where nobody says it's going to be perfect. The goal is to make it safer than human, and it already is. FSD Beta with human supervision is already safer than human drivers. We know this fact. He ignores that fact. But he has this idea that somehow you're going to put it in a lab, and you're going to demonstrate in the lab it doesn't run over children in a crosswalk, and poof, it's okay to drive in the real world. What about children who aren't in a crosswalk? What about children in the driveway? What about children on a sidewalk? What about other people? What about hitting other cars? There's an infinite variety of scenarios that a full self-driving car has to face in the world. And the idea that you can take one scenario or 5 scenarios or 50 scenarios and prove you can handle that in a lab, and somehow that makes you qualified to handle the infinite variety of the real world, is a massive blunder by Dan. He just does not understand that concept. His very limited thinking, either he knows what he's doing is false and he's lying, or he's just that limited in his brain capacity and his way of thinking that he can't understand that the real world is way too complicated. And what Tesla FSD is doing, it is learning from the real world. Put it out on the road, human supervision. It's already demonstrated it's safer than human that way. And the cars experience the real world. They see an infinite variety of ways that things happen. And over time, the way machine learning works is you're able to train the software to do better and better based on real world experience. That's what FSD Beta is actually doing. That's what no one else is doing at the same scale that Tesla is doing it.
They've given it out to 100,000 people. They sold it. I don't mean give it. Cost $12,000. 100,000 people are running that software right now. They've been downloaded the software. And by the end of the year, Elon Musk said he's going to let all their customers have it. So that's hundreds of thousands of millions. I don't know. A huge number.
For machine learning to work, you need to generate huge volumes of data. The cars are experiencing the real world. The more cars experiencing more of the real world, the more data you generate, the more compute you have, the more supercomputers you have in your home office that are receiving the data from the cars and processing and figuring out how best to program the cars to handle the real world based on all the data they've experienced, identifying objects, predicting what objects are going to do. All of this needs huge amounts of data. That is the solution. That's how machine learning works. Dan has no clue. Dan thinks you can have 5 guys in a lab and 5 engineers program, tell the car to do this in this situation, do this in that situation. You can't program for everything directly. You need machine learning to get there because the world is just too complicated. And that's over Dan's head. Now we're going to hear about Dan's near-death experience with full self-driving beta.
It doesn't work. I mean, it does not drive you competently. You have to save yourself. I have a video. It has to come out yet. It'll be published in a few weeks. I was in the car. I was the passenger, not the driver. And we're driving along this country road, perfectly good road, got a nice yellow line down the middle. And this other BMW starts coming down the other side. Everything's fine, except it's actually got its tires on the yellow line when it's coming around the turn. And when it was 57 feet in front of it, the Model S, the full self-driving, turned left in front of that car 57 feet when it was 57 feet away. And the driver of my car grabbed the wheel and ripped it back to the right with 0.4 seconds to spare. He saved our lives.
So this story doesn't completely hold up. We're on a country road. How fast are we going, Dan? If we're going 60 miles an hour and the BMW coming the other way is going 60 miles an hour, then each vehicle is going 88 feet per second. Our relative speeds are 176 feet per second. So if we're 57 feet away when the car makes the mistake, we have 1/3 of a second before collision because they're 57 feet away and they're approaching at 176 feet per second. So maybe the numbers are up, but you have basically very limited time. And human reaction time is about 1/3 of a second. So if with 1/3 of a second to go, the car was steering into the path of the BMW, the human driver would not have been able to react in time. Human reaction time just isn't that fast. So these facts really don't fit together well, Dan. Your story isn't, we don't have video. We don't know what kind of video Dan's going to produce of this incident, if he's ever going to produce video of this incident. This is Dan just telling a story. Now, I have driven down many country roads with FSD Beta, and it has never done that. And what did he tell you? The BMW coming the other way, its wheels went on the double yellow line. The human driver made an error, right? The human driver made an error. He does not hold the BMW driver accountable in any way, shape, or form for the fact that the BMW was coming into the Tesla's lane. Right now, we don't know what exactly happened. We only have Dan's story, but he admits that the human driver made a mistake in a fairly dangerous situation, coming the opposite direction, and somehow he claims now maybe the BMW driver came over the yellow line and the Tesla was trying to avoid a collision. We don't know. We only have Dan telling stories. Dan believes that his way of solving the world's problems is he'll tell you his story and somehow you're supposed to be convinced. I will tell you, I've driven a heck of a lot of miles on FSD Beta. It hasn't done that to me yet. And I know an awful lot of other people who've driven FSD Beta. Now, it has made mistakes. Every once in a while, it does something stupid and I have to stop it. The vast majority of my interventions are non-critical. I just don't like what it's doing. It makes a lane change I don't like. It doesn't make an unsafe lane change. It just makes a lane change I don't agree with. I want to be in the right lane. I don't want to be in the left lane. I don't agree with you. I intervene. That's most of my interventions. Or its mapping is wrong. It's taking us to the wrong spot. We need to go in this entrance, not at that entrance, and I take over. Does it sometimes make bigger mistakes? Yeah, but not very much. And in his vision of the world, it's like 8 minutes. Every 8 minutes, it makes this monster mistake that would cause you to lose your driver's license. He doesn't compare, by the way, or that cause you not to get your driver's license in a driver's test. Does he compare this to human drivers? This is the other thing. That we set this impossible standard that FSD Beta has to be perfect when human drivers aren't. It just needs to be better than human. As soon as it's better than human, lives are saved. It's already better than human. FSD Beta on the road in the hands of drivers supervising it is already safer than human. He completely ignores the massively spectacular safety record of FSD Beta with human supervision. He ignores it, doesn't get it, doesn't care.
We were warned that this software wasn't perfect, right? I mean, it does say that. When you turn it on, it says it might do the wrong thing at the worst time. That's a hell of a warning. Well, what's the wrong thing? Turning left and going over the yellow line. What's the wrong time? When there's a BMW 57 feet away. I guess they warned me that this could happen. It's insane that they would sell a product that could do that. But that BMW guy never signed any waiver, right? They make you sign waivers before you can run the software. But the BMW guy, he'd be dead if we'd have crashed into him, headlong into him,
Again, this complaint, here's the reality. We put, again, this sort of like, let's look at FSD Beta in the abstract and say, this doesn't seem right. We put teenage drivers on the road with parents supervising them without full driver's licenses, human beta drivers on the road every day. Millions of them. I taught teenagers to drive. My friends taught their teenagers to drive. The other drivers didn't sign anywhere to say, I consent to having human teen beta drivers on the road with me. And teenage drivers make mistakes and they cause accidents. They have a much higher accident rate than adult drivers. And the difference, as someone who has taught teenagers to drive, the difference between supervising FSD Beta and teaching teenagers to drive is when I teach teenagers to drive, I sit in the passenger seat. I can't really control the steering wheel. I can kind of grab it, but not really control it. And I can't touch the pedals at all. When I'm supervising FSD Beta, so when my kid makes a mistake, I can tell him what to do, but I can't really control the vehicle. When I'm supervising FSD Beta, if FSD Beta does something wrong, I've got my hand on the wheel or close to the wheel. I can take over the wheel. I can hit the brake pedal. I can hit the accelerator pedal. I can fully control the car essentially instantaneously. So supervising FSD Beta is safer than teaching a teenager to drive. And you don't see Dan saying, hey, we shouldn't let teenagers drive on the roads. We should put teenagers in a lab somewhere on a test track, and they shouldn't be allowed on the roads until they've driven in a real world, until they've demonstrated they passed these 50 tests in some sort of lab scenario. There are countries that make it much harder to get a driver's license in the United States, but you don't see Dan suggesting we do that here in the United States. Dan doesn't care about traffic safety. Dan just hates Tesla. He hates Elon Musk and he hates Tesla. And he has this warped perspective. He can't see it any other way. Okay, next we hear a little bit from the host of this interview, Nick Espinosa, a genius in the world of self-driving software and all kinds of software.
And so if there's 100,000 of these out there in beta test, just for my audience, from a software development standpoint, as well as I do, beta means it's not a finished product. Beta means it's in testing. You're basically expecting your 100,000 drivers to basically report back and say, oh, it turned left in front of a train, or it almost hit a BMW, or...
No, you are not expecting your beta test drivers to report back. This is not how the machine learning works. There is a button when you're driving FSD Beta. There is a little video camera type button that you can have on the screen to tell it, hey, you guys should take a look at this. But the car sends back data on everything. Every time you tell the car, you hit the brake while FSD Beta is running. Every time you take control of the steering wheel, the car's taking a snapshot of everything that happened, and it's all going up to the home office. It does not require the individual driver to say, hey, this is what happened. The car is recording massive amounts of data. It is uploading massive amounts of data. 100,000 FSD beta testing cars are uploading massive amounts of data. I believe the rest of the fleet is also uploading massive amounts of data. Tesla is able to recognize this is a situation we're dealing with. Let's send a message down to the fleet of cars. Hey, do you have any video of something like this? And the cars are able to send up relevant data. It's not based on the idea that individual testers are sending data back up. And they do have their own fleet of their own employees, advanced driver assistance system testers, ADAS testers that they've hired. I'm friends with one of them. And they do detailed reporting on their experiences with driving the Tesla FSD Beta. They're actually testing the version that isn't released to the public yet. So there's a lot of testing going. These guys talk as if Tesla just slapped this software together and put it on the road and that's it. Tesla has a massive operation to monitor how the cars are doing, to upload information from the cars, to improve how the cars are driving. They've got ADAS testers who are testing early versions of the software. The engineering team is testing early versions of software. They're taking copious notes. They're uploading. They're looking for things before that goes out to the beta fleet. And the beta fleet is recording massive amounts of data and sending that up to the world's, some of the top the leading AI training supercomputers in the world to figure out how to drive better in the future. It is a massive problem, and Tesla is making a massive effort to do better and better and better. And these guys have no clue what Tesla is doing. They haven't. None of these guys have watched Autonomy Day or AI Day. They'd never watched an Andrej Karpathy talk about what they're doing. They have no clue what's going on. They have this vision in their head that there's 3 computer programmers at Tesla who programmed FSD Beta and sent it out there, and that's it. That's the system. That's not the system. That's not what's going on, and they just don't get it.
It hit mannequin children and all of that. I mean, that is, I think, absolutely crazy that you would have basically something that could essentially be weaponized. I mean, we've literally seen people kill other people by driving cars into crowds intentionally. Imagine an unintentional Tesla doing that. I understand this is pretty much, I'm sure we're both fun at parties, but obviously this is a tough conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure they're both fun at parties. Look, he's correct. Humans use cars as weapons, either intentionally and sometimes accidentally. Humans launch cars into other people or they cause accidents. The goal is to get self-driving cars that are safer than human drivers. And these guys don't care that human drivers are fundamentally unsafe. Elon Musk, the Tesla team, is working on making self-driving cars that are safer than human. They're already there. FSD Beta with human supervision is safer than human. My FSD, my non-FSD Beta with my supervision is safer than me alone. They don't care about actual safety. They're not thinking deep enough to say, what is Elon really trying to do? What is the Tesla team really trying to do? Do they actually believe that there's hundreds of engineers at Tesla said, hey, let's go send these dangerous robots out into the road and see how many people we can kill? That's not what the Tesla team is doing. The Tesla team is motivated to make the roads safer. My friend, he's not an ADAS tester anymore. He's now testing the Semi, but he joined Tesla because his brother was killed in a car accident. He was emotionally distraught over that. And he decided he wanted to do his part to make self-driving cars happen sooner, and he joined the Tesla team for that purpose. These are people who passionately want to make the road safer for humans and for animals and everything else. And these guys don't care. They haven't bothered to think through what's really going on at Tesla. What are they trying to do? How does this really work? They don't care. They just hate. So now we're going to hear Dano's spin that Tesla software is the worst software in the history of the world. Host is going to start it off. Let's listen to this nonsense.
Was that, and I quote you, Tesla self-driving is the worst commercial software I have ever seen. So without getting too deeply technical, can you elaborate on that? Like, have you looked at the source code, or are you just saying that because of in your testing, every, I think it was 8 minutes, this thing is hitting something or doing something it shouldn't do?
Have you looked at the source code? He doesn't answer that question. Of course he hasn't looked at the source code.
Right. It is making a safety error. Our definition was that the California has a handbook, and it says if you are taking the driver's test to get your driver's license, it lists a bunch of things that if you do them, you're out, right? You flunk right there.
Okay.
So we made like running a stop sign or turning right out of a left-hand turn lane, or something stupid like that. Not necessarily that you would cause a crash, but just something you'd get a ticket for right away. And at every 8 minutes, it malfunctions. It is a safety malfunction. I challenge anyone to find a single product they've ever used that it was acceptable that it failed every 8 minutes.
So this every 8 minutes thing, you follow the average human driver, they're going to do something that probably technically violates some rule every 8 minutes. I don't know. I've seen an awful lot of human drivers do an awful lot of stupid things on the road. I never bothered to sit in the average human driver's car and count. But we know that human drivers make lots of mistakes. I know I personally make mistakes on the road. Of course, I'm the best driver in the world, but I make mistakes on the road. We all make mistakes on the road. And nobody advocating for FSD Beta says it's perfect yet. And we don't expect it to ever be perfect. The goal, better than human, he's not making that comparison. And the key point here is, what are you comparing this to? So he's saying it's the worst software ever. What other software has he subjected to the same testing? So he's saying it makes all these mistakes. Has he taken a Waymo or a Cruise or an Argo AI, put it under the same kind of testing that he's put Tesla under? The answer is, of course not. Get some other self-driving car, subject it to the same scenarios that you subjected Tesla to, and then tell us how it did. And put it all on video and run the comparison. And he won't do that because he knows either those cars won't drive at all in the situations that Tesla's driving in, or they would fail miserably in those situations. We've seen videos of, Cruise can't handle a moderately sharp curve on an interstate highway. We've seen these problems. We've seen Waymos getting, lost in San Francisco. They get stuck on some street. They're not perfect either. But you're not comparing them in the same scenarios, so we don't know. Take some other self-driving. This is the test. This is the test that Dan should be doing if he wants to say it's the worst software ever. Is take another piece of comparable software, another car with self-driving software on it, run it through the exact same scenarios that you're running the Tesla through. Does it do better? The answer is it can't. They can't even do it at all. So Tesla's clearly superior because they just won't even drive. The Teslas will drive, and my car's driven through all kinds of scenarios. Is it perfect? No, but it's better than any other car at it because the other cars won't even try it. And Dan knows that. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he's that dumb that it hasn't occurred to him that if I'm going to compare software A to software B, I should compare them in the same context. But he hasn't done that. He's just manufactured a standard that he doesn't apply to anybody else. I'm sorry, I just love this cranky old man in the easy chair look for Dan. But anyway, let's go forward.
And this is a self-driving car. 1 billion lives. When we do self-driving and everybody does self-driving, there's going to be 1 billion people in cars at a given moment.
You got 8 billion people in the world at a given moment. I don't know, a third of them are asleep. And a third of them are you're going to have 1/8 of the world's population in cars at a given moment. I think that's a stretch, Dan. I don't think there's going to be 1 billion people in the cars at a given moment. I think Dan's got weird perspective here.
The world somewhere, their lives will depend on that software.
Right now, human lives in cars, when humans are in cars, their lives depend on the software in our brains. The hardware are these eyes, and the software in hardware and software in our brains to process everything. That's already the case. That human lives are at stake with human hardware and human software operating cars. And we're not very good at it. 40,000 deaths a year in the United States, 1 million worldwide. We're not very good at it. The goal is to do better. and self-driving cars will do better. They're 8 eyes instead of 2, 360-degree view, more frames per second, never gets tired, never falls asleep at the wheel, doesn't take drugs, doesn't get distracted by the girl at the bikini. Yes, I get distracted by girls in bikinis. Doesn't get distracted by the kids in the back seat. The self-driving software is inherently better than human. Once it gets trained well enough, which we're not there yet, it still needs more training, but the training happens because the cars are on the road. The training happens because the cars are on the road experiencing the real world. It's not going to work in Dan's lab. Dan has this idea, you take a few programmers, you put the car behind closed doors, you have it drive around on a test track, and when it drives well enough on the test track, poof, you can release it in the real world, and that misses the problem. Here we're going to hear Dan's badly misunderstood concept of how self-driving cars should come about.
The best software ever written, the most carefully designed, the most carefully implemented, the most carefully tested. As much as we can, we should do everything we can to make it the best program ever written, because 1 billion lives depend on it. Not the worst program that's ever been sold. I don't mean that there have been products that internally were terrible, were worse. This is a product that actually got sold to people, and it's for their car.
So the most carefully designed, blah, blah, blah. Listen, Dan claims he's a billionaire. If Dan wants to start a self-driving startup and create software that will drive cars, he apparently knows how to do it. So why isn't he doing it? Why is he instead bitching about somebody who's actually doing it? Now, the team at Tesla, he seems completely unaware that Tesla has a team of engineers that are working really hard on this, that they have a thoughtful approach for how to get this done. Yes, Argo has an approach to getting it done. Waymo, Cruise have an approach to getting it done. It doesn't seem like they're doing it in a way that's going to scale. It seems to me that Tesla has a better way of doing it. But he has this fantasy that there's some sort of careful design process that will magically deliver self-driving cars that are safe at some point in the future. And this is the thing that gets me particularly angry about this. Those who follow my channel, you'll know my daughter's friend was killed crossing in a crosswalk, hit by a human driver. A child hit in a crosswalk by a human driver. Okay, the thing that he's supposedly concerned about, a human driver hit this child, Hannah, in the crosswalk and killed her. I believe that if FSD Beta had been driving that car, it would have seen her and it would have stopped. Based on my experience, I was driving the car down the road. A guy walked out from behind a bush. I didn't see him. The car started to slow down. I was getting ready to hit the accelerator because I thought it was a phantom braking incident. And then I saw the guy and the car saved his life. If Tesla is delivering self-driving cars that are going to be safer than human, and I believe they already have, you're going to get to a point where you start replacing human drivers. And you're going to get to the point where there are no human drivers anymore. Right now, human drivers kill 40,000 people a year in the United States and 1 million worldwide. If you delay the advent of self-driving cars by 1 year, you'll kill 40,000 people in the United States and you kill 1 million people worldwide. This is inescapable math. If we have a solution that's going to come at some point that's going to save this many lives every year, and you delay it by 1 year, you've killed 40,000 people, America, and 1 million worldwide. You have. You cannot delay this software. Even if this process is going to kill a few people. Let's say it's going to take 3 years to actually get there, or 5 years to actually get there. And in the course of doing so, in the testing process, 10 people are going to die. I'm not conceding that that's going to happen. And the reality is, are 10 more people going to die than if humans were doing the same driving? That I don't think is true. But even if it were true, if it cost 10 lives to save 40,000 in the United States and 1 million worldwide, I'm going to say it's worth it. It's not fair to the 10 people who died, but nobody counts the 40,000 people whose lives are saved and the 1 million people worldwide whose lives are saved. Nobody counts that. This is really important, and people who are standing in the way of this transition to much safer self-driving cars is killing tens of thousands, millions of people. Dan O'Dowd unconsciously, I don't believe he consciously wants to kill tens of thousands or millions of people, but Dan O'Dowd unconsciously, not being aware of why he's wrong, is trying to take us down a path where tens of thousands of people in the United States and millions of people worldwide die needlessly when they could have been saved by the future of self-driving cars. Now let's hear what Dano thinks of Waymo.
What's interesting is that Tesla's not the leader. Tesla's not even close to the leader. Tesla is way back of the pack. right now, Waymo has hundreds of absolutely driverless cars. There is no driver. There is no one in the seat driving all over San Francisco. So does Cruise.
Literally all over San Francisco, including to like dead end streets and getting caught stuck in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, okay.
Waymo has them in Phoenix. Argo AI has them in Houston and Miami. Baidu has them in Beijing and Guangzhou. AutoX has them in Shenzhen. We have at least 6 companies with actual driverless cars driving all over some of the biggest cities on Earth. Is already driverless technology. Now, it does have accidents. It was just a report, and there have been accidents, but they're working on it.
But they're working on it. Do you see how he's holding these other companies to a different standard than he's holding Tesla? Tesla, anything bad happens with Dan in the car, anything bad happens anywhere, take them off the roads, they've got to stop. These other car companies, oh, they're operating in all these big cities, and oh yeah, there've been accidents, but they're working on it. Somehow, that's a radically different standard that Dano applies to these other companies than he applies to Tesla. It's absurd.
And it is getting better. It's not, if you use Tesla as an example, it would be never. But they're not the leaders. They're not even close to the leaders.
You can see that Dano has this crazy idea. And it, again, get these cars. Dan, get your hands on one of these cars, subject it to the same test you're subjecting Tesla to. Or take a Tesla to the places, because we drove a Tesla Model 3 with FSD Beta along with a Cruise, a Waymo vehicle in Chandler, Arizona. And the Tesla was better. The Waymo made this bizarre series of 3 right turns instead of making a left turn. It stopped in the middle of the street to let us out of the car. The Tesla went into the parking lot where we were going and let people out in the parking lot. The Tesla was actually better in that scenario than the self-driving Waymo. We actually experienced this. The Waymo was okay. I mean, we're not saying it was terrible, but it wasn't as good as Tesla FSD Beta. It was not. You can see Dan making his apples to oranges comparison right here when he talks about Cruise versus Tesla.
If you use Tesla as an example, it would be never. But they're not the leaders. They're not even close to the leaders. As we said, 8 minutes, it fails. The Cruise systems, they go 40,000 miles before they do something stupid, not 10 miles before they do something stupid.
Wow.
Not good enough. 40,000 is not good enough. Humans are better.
So right in there, you see him comparing Tesla to Cruise, and you see him comparing Tesla to humans. But he's comparing his experience with Tesla in one setting to Cruise's experience in a completely different setting, to human drivers in completely different settings. It's real simple, Dan. You should be taking a Cruise vehicle and putting it through the same paces you put the Tesla through. You can't, because a Cruise can't drive in those settings. You should be sitting in the passenger seat watching human drivers drive and notice how many mistakes human drivers make, but you don't do that. You don't subject them to the same standard. Human drivers run stop signs all the time. They do the California rolling stop all the time, but you're not making a fair comparison there. You say anytime a Tesla does a rolling stop, in a completely safe situation, you say that's a fail. But human drivers do that all the time. Your bogus comparison is nonsense, Dan. In this clip, Dan is going to demonstrate that he has no idea what Tesla is doing. He doesn't know what their methods are. He comes up with his own random method. Apparently, the way you're supposed to test your self-driving software is you're supposed to run it in a parking lot, as opposed to running it in the real world, on roads everywhere. Apparently, running into the parking lot doing one simple test is enough to decide whether software is safe for the world, as opposed to the way Tesla is doing it. And he accuses the Tesla AI team of being idiots when these are the top AI engineers in the world. It's a fantastic team, and this guy he's just a hater. That's all he is. He's a hater.
Designed wrong. It's implemented wrong. They don't test. Do they? Okay. Do you think that they test it? Do they have a test lab? Not a lab, but like a parking lot where they go out and they put various objects in front of the car, like I did, and see what it runs over and what it doesn't run over. Do they run that test? Maybe they don't run the test. How can The test engineering department should be fired if that isn't one of their tests. You got to know what you're going to run over, or they do have that. And then what? And it fails the test, and they put it on the road anyway. Do they know that? I don't get it. It doesn't make it. It does make. They're idiots. I mean, it's just incompetent.
Yeah.
Every level.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Dan has no idea what he's doing. But look, Dan, you're a self-proclaimed billionaire. You have more than 5 times as much money as Elon Musk had when he started Tesla, and he used half of that. So if you're so confident that you know how to build self-driving software, go ahead. Start up a company and build your own self-driving software. You're smarter than Elon Musk. You're smarter than the Tesla engineering team. You can hire people who are smarter than the Tesla engineering team because they're idiots. He completely ignores that Tesla hires ADAS testers. Tesla has an ADAS team, Advanced Driver Assistance System testing team. They hire people, they drive all over the country. They're testing in all kinds of environments. They're testing to make sure it's improving. They're testing to make sure how well it does. These are committed people. They're dedicated people. They're trying to make sure that the cars are safe. And they're doing well. Dan has no idea what's required. He claims he's an expert. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And it's sad to see this POS trying to tell the Tesla team what to do. You'd have no idea. Look, it's real simple. Invest your money, sell your company, or within your company, do a self-driving startup and do it right. Do it better than Tesla. You apparently know what you're doing better than Tesla, so show us. Prove you're right. Prove you know what you're doing. Build a better self-driving software. What's the holdup, Dan? You want to save lives, don't you? Now, this is one of those funny moments where the host just says something incredibly stupid, and I just died laughing when I heard this.
Yeah, well, and God forbid they're using that in their SpaceX rockets. If you're thinking about it that way, if they're moving to, astronautless, rockets and all that kind of stuff too. Hopefully they're not leveraging this.
They've done it over 100 times, you dumbass. Every Starlink launch except for Crew Dragon is an astronaut-less launch. Falcon 9 launches are all without astronauts. They all launch payloads into space. They all come back down and land on Earth, either on a boat or on a landing platform at a launch site, without humans controlling it. This is how dumb the critics are. How would you say something that stupid without realizing humans are not capable of landing a rocket? You need computer precision to do it. This is precisely why we need computers to drive cars, because ultimately computers will do it better than humans could not do what SpaceX rockets do. This is what's magical about the SpaceX team. It's what's magic about the Tesla team. And if you're an idiot who has a podcast, apparently you can say incredibly stupid stuff and your audience won't care. And Dan doesn't correct him. Dan doesn't say, well, actually, SpaceX rockets do fly without astronauts. How'd you miss that, Dan? Here you're going to see Dan's brilliance in not knowing what NHTSA stands for and misunderstanding or demonstrating the stupidity of regulation in some circumstances when it comes to rolling through stop signs. Listen to Dan here.
But can you explain what exactly you're asking our government for here? And also, have you had responses, good or bad, from members of Congress or senators, as a result of the campaign you've just started?
Well,
notice the pause. The pause is no one's responded to him. No one cares. So he pauses and then he proceeds to not answer the question. And he gets the name wrong.
So their National Highway Transportation Safety Agency, which we call.
It's the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. It's not the National Highway Transportation Safety Act or Agency. He got 2 words wrong, one of them twice. He doesn't even know what he's talking about when it comes to the regulatory side. Dan's an idiot.
NHTSA.
Right.
NHTSA is responsible for car safety. They pass rules and say you have to do this and you can't do that. For instance, recently, it came out that Tesla was not stopping at stop signs. It would come into an intersection, look around and say, there's nobody here. Why should I stop? And it would just kind of roll through the stop sign and keep going. which is technically illegal, but also technically what an awful lot of people really do.
Well, we got to stop that. If they're doing something that's completely safe and something that humans do, we clearly need to stop the software from doing something that's completely safe and driving the way humans drive when it's safe to do so. Clearly. I'm glad Dan's on top of this. I'm glad NHTSA's on top of this.
So Tesla programmed it to do that because they didn't want to have to stop when there was no reason to.
Okay, Tesla didn't program it to do that. Tesla programmed the car to learn from human drivers to some extent, to learn how to drive safely, and machine learning, the car learned to do it in that way. This is one of those things about machine learning, is it will learn to do things in ways that humans might not necessarily program it to do. But Dan admits that it was a safe thing to do and still advocates for stopping Teslas from doing something that's safe.
It got out, somebody published a paper on it, and then NHTSA came to Tesla and said, you can't do that. You can't program it to break the law. Mm-hmm. And Tesla explained a bit, and then eventually they changed it. And NHTSA pressured them through their regulatory authority and said, you can't do that. You have to stop at the stop sign like the law says.
So what Dan wants is, even though Teslas are driving safely and they are not killing children despite Dan's videos and his bullshit testing, Dan wants NHTSA to stop Tesla from driving in a safe manner because Dan doesn't like it, because Dan thinks the software isn't right. This is the idiocy that is Dan O'Dowd. Now, I'm happy to report we're coming to the end of this video, and you get to hear the brilliant proposals of Dan O'Dowd about how he's going to solve these problems, or how Congress or NHTSA can solve these problems. Absolutely brilliant. I'm not making this up.
That's what they do. They make rules. They usually make the rules when something bad happens, but their charter actually says they're supposed to stop things before bad things. We don't have to wait for a child to be killed unambiguously killed in a crosswalk by a full self-driving car. We could just wait to sacrifice a child, and then we could do what we need to do, or we can do it now before we do that.
So my daughter's friend Hannah was killed in a crosswalk by a human driver. Dan hasn't done anything to stop human drivers from killing children in crosswalks. He's not pushing for NHTSA to stop human drivers from killing children in crosswalks. I'm particularly upset about the loss of this girl. Hannah was a friend of my daughter. I knew this girl, and I want Tesla to succeed in developing self-driving software that saves lives, and they're already doing it. FSD Beta, FSD already makes driving safer than humans without FSD. We know this. This is the well-documented evidence of this. This is a guy, there's over 100 people a day in the United States who are killed by human drivers. There's thousands, many thousands killed a year worldwide by human drivers. Dan wants the carnage to continue. He opposes Tesla's effort to actually make the roads safer. Doesn't care. Maybe it's about company profit. Maybe he's just an absolute freaking moron. I don't know. But you never hear him talking about ending the carnage on the roads caused by human drivers. Now, all these critics of FSD Beta, they never genuinely take a look at, well, how many people do human drivers kill and how does FSD Beta do compared to that? They don't care. They are haters and they don't care about actually saving lives.
That's the question. NHTSA has the power to do this. My answer is NHTSA should pass a rule. It should be really easy. I don't think there should be any objection. You can't put your self-driving car on the road until you prove it doesn't run over children in crosswalks.
Here's the question. How do you prove it? Tesla proves it by running FSD Beta on roads all over the United States. Something like 35 million miles so far, 100,000 drivers testing FSD Beta, and it hasn't run over a child in a crosswalk yet. How many miles do you need, Dan? How many miles do you need? Human drivers run over children in crosswalks. Human drivers hit pedestrians. Human drivers crash. FSD Beta hasn't killed anyone yet, Dan. 35 million miles. It's safer than human drivers. What's the goal? And is the goal perfection or is the goal safer than human? Dan doesn't really, does he think that self-driving cars have to be perfect before they're allowed on the roads? Does Dan think we should take human drivers off the roads? Does Dan think we should stop the current policy of allowing teenagers to learn to drive with untrained parents supervising them driving on public roads? Well, let's hear more about Dan's proposal. He's brilliant. Let's hear what he has to say.
And how do you do that? You have a set of government testing like you saw before, with the crash dummies, except you have setups. You put various sized dummies in front of the car and you see if it stops. You know, you say go, and if it stops, you say that's good, you passed. If it runs them over, you failed. Put together a test like that. Just, you know, have 50 different scenarios and make sure it does it. And then you can go, you know, then you can go back on the road. But everybody needs to do that, including Waymo and those guys. They should have to do it too. Why do we allow things on our roads that will kill children? It just doesn't make sense.
So the lie here is Dan has previously said that he supports Waymo and Cruise and all these other companies operating their self-driving cars, robo-taxis, and all these places. They're ahead of Tesla. They're great. But now all of a sudden, Dan has this vision for 50 tests that the NHTSA will set up in some parking lot somewhere, and you have to pass these 50 tests. And if you set up a limited number of tests, whether it's 5 tests or 50 tests or whatever, then the companies that are making the software will engineer their cars to pass the test. That is a narrow test. Teslas are driving in real world situations. There is infinite variety that the cars will face in the real world. You cannot resolve that issue by having it do 50 tests with mannequins. Teslas aren't designed to detect mannequins. They're designed to detect humans. They're designed to distinguish. The cars are designed to observe real world conditions. They are training themselves. They are training the cars through real world experience and through AI training. They're training the cars to drive, and they recognize real objects, real things that happen in the world. Mannequins don't stand in the roadway. And if you hit a mannequin, it's not bad. So that's not an appropriate test if you want to develop something that's going to learn to drive in real world situations. That's not going to solve the problem. Dan has no solution to the problem. His solution is idiotic. Companies will game their cars to beat the test, just like Volkswagen gamed their cars to beat the emissions tests. And then they'll put their cars out on the road and they'll kill people. Tesla is designing their cars to drive in the real world. They're engineering their self-driving software to drive in the real world. They're experiencing the real world, learning from the real world, and driving better. Dan has no clue. And, you know, Dan, you're a billionaire. Go ahead, start up a company to make self-driving software better than all these other idiots, because you're so smart. You know what you're doing. You hire your team. Or you could just sit there on your lazy... This is so comical that he's sitting like this. It's like Archie Bunker sitting on a lazy chair, like easy chair, telling people what to do. Oh, these kids these days, they don't know what they're doing. Dan, you're pathetic. You're a damn shame. Everyone else... over 100 people a day die in American roads from human drivers. Tesla's going to save us from that. Tesla's FSD is in the lead. They're making progress. It's going to be better. Thank you, Elon Musk. Thank you, Tesla team. Goodbye, Dan. You'll be history soon. You won't be missed. Please check out my other videos. Please support this channel on Locals, Patreon, as a YouTube channel member. Links in the description below. Check out my other videos. Subscribe to the channel. Check out the t-shirts at elonbits.com. And thank you so much for watching.